Okay, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to the fifth session of Accelerating into Leadership. Today, we are joined by a very esteemed guest, a friend of Neither Trust, and I'm sure you won't be disappointed by what we're going to be going over in today's session. So, Auntie Rukhsana is how I refer to her. Auntie Rukhsana is, how can I say, one of our elders, one of our friends of Neither Trust, and she is our Ustada. She has a tremendous amount of experience, working experience, and you're going to be accustomed to getting to know her as the course progresses. Now, what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be sharing my screen with everyone so you can see exactly what we're doing. Just give me one moment. I'm just having a few technical issues over here. Right, okay, let's just double check that we are recording this. Yes, we are.
It's recording.
Lovely. Okay, so here we go. So today's session is going to be all about managing difficult conversations, and Auntie Rukhsana has a tremendous amount of experience in school leadership. And if we look at this slide over here, if you quickly familiarize yourself with some of her achievements to date, they are extraordinary, because you can see she's begun teaching from 1979, and as you can see as we go through her achievements, mashallah, she has consulted many, worked at the top level, and at the same time chaired and become board of members of some very astute organizations. Currently, she's a school governor, with a tremendous amount of insight into school leadership and how to, run schools effectively. She's also a mentor and coach, so she supports teachers as well as senior leaders through their journey in education. And most importantly, now she's an independent consultant, specializing in supporting institutes, individuals in getting from good to outstanding. So, Auntie Rukhsana, first and foremost, I'd like to say Assalamu alaikum and welcome.
Thank you.
Okay, so we're going to be progressing on to the learning objectives, Auntie, so I'm going to pass that over to you.
Thank you for that very kind introduction. First, I'd like to start off by saying Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, and thank you for this opportunity. And I'd like to thank Neither Trust in general for putting on these amazing Zoom sessions. I've joined the first two. I've not been there for the last two, but they're really positive and a really useful learning experience for everyone. Thank you very much, Shoaib, for organising this, for leading and sharing, and you're doing a fabulous job in what would you call it, hosting?
Something like that, yeah.
Well done, thank you. Okay, so managing difficult conversations is probably one of the most difficult and challenging parts of being a middle leader. So that's why a whole session has been devoted to it, and we're going to look at 4 different areas. Why are some conversations challenging? How you can prepare for the conversation, structuring the conversation so it leads to positive outcomes, and making the conversation a success. So we're going to share with you some slides, some information, and some resources for you to be confident to do that. This series of seminars is for middle leaders or aspiring middle leaders, and this is session, I think, 5 of 6 sessions, so they have 1 more session to go. So we're going to explore the 4 areas, as I said, and I'd like everyone at the moment just to think of, if possible, a difficult conversation that they've had. It might be recent, it might be professional, it might not be professional, but if you think about a difficult conversation that you've had, or more importantly, a difficult conversation that you're putting off having, it might be quite useful at this point if you type in some of the examples, and then later on, we're going to pick up some of the things that people type. So if you have a minute, you can type that. Is that okay, Shoaib?
Absolutely, no problem. I'm just going to ensure that I can actually see what other people are typing, and then I can relate it back to yourself.
So why are some conversations challenging? And if you're a new middle leader, or you're thinking about becoming a middle leader, it's really important to try and address this situation, because this is probably the one thing that will cause people sleepless nights. Because if you start off as a teacher, you're working with friends and colleagues and you can have banter with people and everything's fine. But once you take that promotion, you're either as a head of department or as a head of year or some position of responsibility. You have people in your team and you're no longer friends in the same way as before, because you might have to take someone who was your friend and have to discipline them or pull them up, or, you know, the list given there about poor employee performance, staff conduct, matters of grievance, giving bad news, addressing conflict. There are all sorts of things, and that's why some of the conversations are challenging. It's good to see some people are typing examples in, and we'll pick them up later on, so that's really useful. In very general terms, this bit is slightly more broadly than having challenging conversations, but in your role as a middle leader, if you're leading a team, I think in general, it's really important for you to try and build up good relationships within your team and rapport. So in general terms, and I'll give you an example later on if we have time of when this isn't the case, but in general, if you have a good rapport with individuals in your team, it's slightly easier in order to have a challenging conversation, as opposed to if there's somebody in your team that you don't really get on well with, then on top of that, to have a difficult conversation can be really, really difficult. But so it's to do, in some ways it's to do with power, because as a middle leader, we're going to focus on today having difficult conversations with people who are your junior, and that's going to be the focus of this session. But actually, having difficult conversations, it might be that you have need to have a conversation with somebody above you. And I think the principles of what we're going to say today is the same, but I think you have to be very careful of the power struggle and who's got the power, and that actually puts a slightly different light on relationships. But so that's what we're going to be focusing on, and hopefully by the end of this session you will be more confident. You'll have tools and examples to show you how you can address the difficult conversations. Can you hear me?
Yep, I can hear you loud and clear. Everything is fine, Auntie, from the presentation side. You carry on.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so that's the reason why some conversations are challenging. Could we have the next slide?
Yep.
Thank you. Why are difficult conversations important is actually, as a middle leader, it's probably easier to say, I'm not going to have this conversation and everything might sort itself out. But actually, it's really important to have the difficult conversations and to have them as early as possible, because if you have them early, you can nip certain things in the bud. Whereas if you leave them and things get worse and worse and worse, and then people get used to a certain way of working, then it's actually harder to pull things back. So it could resolve conflicts quickly and efficiently. And employee performance is really key, so it can help lift that, and also it can help improve relationships within your team. So if you've got a really effective team and one person isn't pulling their weight, and you don't tackle that person who's not pulling their weight, other people who work really hard will see that and feel it's not fair, and they might think, well, they're not doing it, so why should I? So to improve relationships within your team, sometimes you need to have difficult conversations. So having a difficult conversation, it's the right thing to do. It's not easy, but it's the right thing to do. So we were talking just now about avoiding difficult conversations because I don't want to hurt someone's feelings. Now's not the time. Everyone makes mistakes. I don't have time. What's the point? The problem will just fix itself. If you leave it, the problem might go away. We often make excuses to avoid difficult conversations, and these are some of the excuses. I don't know whether some of you have had or used some of these excuses before. It's very easy, rather than addressing something that you feel might be difficult, you can find 100 excuses under the sun to avoid them. So I've just given you some examples of excuses that people have made in order not to address a difficult conversation, but actually they're not good in the long term.
That's right. Auntie, we've got one of our guests from Istanbul called Aisha, and she's actually commented and said, some people might be understood by the person we are trying to address, and people are not always open to criticism as well.
Say that again, sorry?
So she's mentioned people might be misunderstood by the person we are trying to address, and people are not always open to criticism.
That's true, that's true, that's true. And especially, I think, if you're a new middle leader, sometimes I've had experience in the past when I became a deputy head at a school, and I was relatively young when I was appointed as deputy, and there were people in the school who were older than me. A lot of the heads of department as a curriculum deputy were older than me, and wait for it, one of the people I was line managing was my old English teacher.
Wow.
And I actually had quite a good relationship with her, but I still felt like that's miss, you know, and you have this thing in your head. So sometimes people are resentful. For example, it might be a young person coming in, or if you're leading someone who also went for your job and you got the job and they didn't. So you might feel that they're looking to see you make a mistake and want to pull you up. So there are all sorts of things, but you're right. And I think what's key in this situation is the relationship, and it depends on how that relationship is to start off with as to how you move forward.
Sure.
But really useful comments. Definitely, the problem will not go away by itself. In fact, avoiding conversation may. And then there are certain ideas that we've written about give the impression that there's no problem. It will exacerbate the problem, probably. Damage productivity, which we've mentioned earlier. And so there are several reasons why it's really important when things start to go wrong to address it straight away rather than leaving it. So staff morale is absolutely key, absolutely key. And the last one is higher absenteeism or turnover. So if people see that you're not addressing difficulties, all these problems will occur, and actually you're making more problems for yourself. So by avoiding one problem, you're actually creating others. Thank you, that's really useful. Okay, so we know why some conversations are challenging. And now step 2, the second objective, is actually preparing for the conversation. So I think it's the preparation for having this difficult conversation is absolutely key. And the clearer you are and the more time you put into planning and preparing for the conversation, the more positive it will be. So if you just think, oh, I've got to talk to this person about this, and I've said do it straight away. So if you just go straight into a meeting and you're not prepared, you're going to say things, or they're going to say things to you, and you've not thought it through, and it might come out quite negative. But if you prepare for the conversation, we're going to give you tools to help you prepare for that conversation. So plan what you're going to say. I think it's really important to be direct and honest, and I'd say 95% of the time the person probably knows what's coming, and so although you're dreading saying it to them, they probably know when things haven't been right. As I've said several times, don't put it off, as it will make it more difficult. Watch your language. What I mean by that is try and actually think about and put yourself into a positive mode to expect a positive outcome, and to try and be as clear as possible. So if you've prepared and thought it through, that's always going to be much easier. Whereas you go into a difficult conversation and you think, oh my God, I don't want to go in, and it may turn pear-shaped, and then I might have the unions on my back, there might be all sorts of problems. If you go in and you're nervous and jittery, the likelihood is you might get a more negative result, whereas if you go in positive, having thought it through. Does that make sense, Shoaib?
Yep, absolutely, Auntie. I think at the same time as well, with preparing for conversations like this, it's never a straightforward thing. That's why they are called challenging conversations. So, I mean, having all these tips and points definitely does lend to one becoming a bit more sort of more confident, because you're going in there prepared and you know the nature of the conversation as well.
Absolutely. And three more little points I just made for myself is try and think about what are the facts. Try and stick to as many factual bits as you can. What is the impact on the team or the organisation? So it's not just that person, it's not just you and that person, it's like the implications of somebody basically not doing their job, and how it impacts on your whole team and the organisation. And actually, number three is what change must be made to turn the thing around. So those three, if you have those three clear in your head, it might be easier. And the other thing, when you prepare for the meeting, it's easy to say, but try and clear your head of everything else. So when you go into the meeting, just focus on that, clear yourself of everything else, and try and be positive. And so those little things hopefully might help in your preparation for the conversation.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we're now going to be moving on to some things that sort of are quite tricky, but people tend to stumble upon them. So over to you, Auntie. There you go.
Okay, so some of the possibilities might be a teacher not marking, punctuality to lessons or school, consistent poor results. I'd say the first three almost go in a bag together. It's about professionalism, really. Number four is unprofessional behaviour between two members of a team. So that's professionalism, but that's more on a personal, individual level. So I'd put them slightly different to the first three. And then number five, rudeness towards a student. So each one has its own challenges, but I'd say the first three fall into a bag together. And we're going to, in some of the examples I'm going to be talking about, we're going to take number one, a teacher's not marking, and we're going to look at that in specific detail, but we could have taken any of them.
Auntie, would it be worth asking the participants now if they can think of any other examples of where people might find it difficult to have conversations of a challenging nature?
Absolutely. Have any come through the chat?
Let's have a look. So we'll give everyone we'll give everyone a minute just to see if they'd like to contribute. So we've got Aisha, who's come back and said, the tips that you're providing so far are very good. It's definitely giving me more confidence. So there you go. Well done. We've got some stuff coming up now. Berger from Primary, not sure who that is. Issues and conflict with parents. That's another one. Allocation of units to teach. Auntie, you must know about that. Science, you know, your background. I mean, no one probably would have wanted to teach physics. Yeah, so we've got those two so far. And let's give another few more seconds.
Okay.
Okay, so, yep. No, nothing else has come through as of yet.
Okay,
Yeah.
no problem.
Okay.
So in order to help you, Shoaib and I were thinking about what would be useful to give you. So sharing examples, me talking about my experience, I hope will be useful, but also we decided to look at this. And Shoaib, do you want to say anything, or should I just start?
Yeah, so with Auntie's experience, we kind of devised a plan to support everyone in terms of how to have the conversation. So this is a template that we've put together so that you know, before you go into your conversation, you can literally point these down point to point. And yeah, so it's just a good way of you planning for that conversation, because sometimes if you don't plan for it and you go into it blindly, something may happen which you could have actually spent time thinking about and having that in place. So so go ahead, Auntie.
Okay, good. Thank you. So we came up with this pro forma, and I always find pro formas are quite useful, even if you don't fill every box in the pro forma. Just getting your head around some of these questions before you go into a difficult meeting might be helpful. So I'm going to go through the pro forma. That so before you go into the difficult conversation, this is to help you plan what you're going to do. So firstly, the outcomes. What outcomes do you want for you or the department or the school? And so the outcome from this meeting, I would like Shoaib to ensure that he marks all the books and provides constructive written feedback to the students. Okay, so that's I'm going to go into the conversation and I'm clear that is what I want. What might the other person be expecting from the meeting? So unless I've made it clear, Shoaib might be coming into this meeting with the line manager thinking, oh yes, it's an opportunity for me to speak to them about promotion. So can you see already, even before the meetings come, the two minds are in a very different place. So not only is Shoaib going to be upset because he's not going to be talking about getting a promotion, but actually I'm going to be challenging him about, you know, why the books haven't been marked or exploring that situation. So later on, I'll pick it up again, but it's really, really important that when you're planning the meeting, it's very clear what the meeting's about, what time, what date, where, and so that the two expectations from the meeting are exactly the same. Shoaib, I was thinking about something.
Go ahead.
I remember this in the past, and there are pros and cons to it, so I'd like your opinion on it, and perhaps the opinion of others.
Sure.
Sometimes some people felt that having a really difficult or challenging meeting, definitely don't have it first thing in the morning, because like if you have it first thing in the morning when somebody's free, they've got the rest of the day to do it. So probably the end of the day is probably a good time and place to have it.
Yeah.
And some people thought a Friday afternoon might be a good time. That they have the Friday, and if they're upset, assuming the worst, if they're upset about it, they've got the weekend to get over it, so that by Monday morning they're fine.
Yep.
Or is it cruel that if you know that the meeting might upset the person, to give them a whole weekend to be upset about it? Would it be better doing it, say, on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, so that they have that time, and then the next day you can see them to make sure that they're okay? What's your opinion on that one?
It's a very tricky question because I mean I've been on the brunt of having a challenging conversation as well, and it's very intimidating in some sense when, for example, your line manager or your head teacher might say to you, yeah, I need to speak to you about something, and they say it to you on a Friday, but they say I'll talk to you about it next week, and they let you fester because it's like, what have I done? But it tends to be nothing big. But I personally feel that having it during the week is ideal, because one, you're acknowledging the situation, you're dealing with it, and then you want to observe the professional behaviors that person exhibits, because if they care about what you've said, then they will be very conscious about making an improvement, showing that improvement, and also wanting to impress you, but also emphasize the fact that they're a part of your school or academy for the right reasons. So I think personally, it's good to do it earlier on in the week or as and when it needs to arise.
Excellent. And can I just pick up one thing? I think
Yeah.
another thing that you've just demonstrated, if that's okay, is also something very bad. And actually, people do it without thinking, oh, I need a word with you, so I'll meet you next week, but don't tell you what it's about. And so human nature is always that you think of, oh my goodness, what's the problem? What have I done wrong? And you stew over it. And it might just be nothing, but the person didn't have, I don't know, the emotional intelligence, or they just didn't have time, or so you need to think very carefully. But you know, when you're busy in a day, it's quite an easy, flippant, off the cuff remark to make.
Yep.
So you need to think of the implications of what you say and how you say and when you say it.
Absolutely. So, Auntie, just in the chat, just to make you aware, we've had a bit of contribution. Kashif Hussain has said, should we not always make the other person aware of the reason for the meeting in advance? I think we've covered that. Sister Nina has said, yes, I would have it on a Friday, so they clear their head. Ehsan says, I believe the time, manner, and place are very important factors, of
Absolutely.
course, without forgetting sandwich way. What's the sandwich way?
Is the sandwich way start off with something positive, say what you've got to say, end up with something negative,
Perfect.
end up with something positive again? Yeah.
Perfect. That just made me hungry all of a sudden.
Perhaps you need to get something to. I was going to talk about the sandwich later, so thank you for that. No, that's really positive, negative, positive. Yeah.
Okay.
Brilliant. So how will you start the conversation? So something like, thank you for agreeing to meet me. Do they know what this meeting is about? If they say yes, ask them what it is. If they say, no, I haven't got a clue, then you need to bring that to their attention. But if you're planning the meeting well, I would suggest you tell them the date, time, place, and reason.
Absolutely.
And after school, once school has been cleared, and then I would actually do it, if it's a difficult conversation, I'd do it where I don't have to rush off afterwards, because the worst thing is to be in the middle of a really difficult conversation, you're just getting to the crux and the bell goes and you've got to go. So does that make sense?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Should we proceed?
Yes, please.
Okay.
How to get your message across effectively. So I'm going to ask people a question, if that's okay, and then go through these two boxes. So the question at the bottom, how do you think the person will react, and prepare for the responses? So if you think about a difficult situation that you've been in, or some of the examples that I've shared with you, if somebody's being called in to talk to you about their marking, and they've not been marking basically, and there've been complaints from parents and pupils, and the book looks all show that, you know, marking is an issue, how do you think the person will react, and what can you do to prepare for the response? So how do you think the person might react? So if you want, just think about that and perhaps type a few things in, and I'll just talk about the two boxes at the top. So how to get your message across effectively. So what are the key messages that you need to get across? And also, what evidence or examples do you have that will help you to get the message across? So a key message might be something like, you are required to mark your students' books, full stop. It's in the school marking policy that this is the regularity at which your books need to be marked. Evidence, the second box, the evidence, I think is absolutely key. And the more evidence you have, and the more different types of evidence that you have to back what you're saying, the better. So, for example, the evidence might be, you've had 5 emails from parents complaining that their child's book's not being marked. You've had 10 students who've come up to you complaining. And in the last book look, your marking was not up to date. And actually, if you're in a good and efficient department and you're looking at books and everyone else's books are up to date and yours isn't, sometimes that stands out even more. So, but the evidence is absolutely key and crucial. So you could have the emails from the parents, you could have what the students have written as complaint, and you can show the evidence of that person's marking compared to everyone else in the department. So it's actual physical evidence. So then I would say, do you agree with the evidence? And if they don't, I would actually show them the evidence. So once you've shown them the evidence, it's actually hard to disagree with all those bits of evidence that you've got. So the key is getting them to see your point of view and where it's coming from. And a little bit like with students, you know, people who are in your department, sometimes the most effective thing that you can say is, you're letting me and the department down. You know, and how does my department look to the rest of the school if I'm getting all these complaints and nobody else has had any complaints? So if you make it we rather than you, do you see? If you're saying, actually, Shoaib, you're rubbish, you're not marking books, it's your fault, pull your socks up, sort yourself out, off you go, you're likely not to take that on board. But if I said to you, Shoaib, this is, parents have complained, students have complained, this doesn't look good compared to everyone else in the department. How can I support you in moving this forward? This is the evidence, and you've got to, do you accept the evidence, Joanne?
Yeah, I mean, everything that you put forward before me, I've got no choice but to.
So how can I support you in moving this forward?
If you could have in regular checks with me, let's just say we meet once a week to review what I've done, the marking that I've done with each class, that might be helpful. Am I marking it to the right standard? And just on that note, Auntie, we've got a question that's that's quite relevant to this conversation by Sister Sadia, who's asked, do we have to show the email that was sent by the parents, like a printed version? So obviously there's a big thing about showing emails, confidentiality, etc., etc.
No, you don't need to show. I think it all goes back to what I said right at the beginning. It depends on your relationship. So if I'm your line manager and I say to you 5 parents have complained, it's professionalism that you do you see? But if I've got a bad relationship with you and you don't trust me and you think I'm out to get you, then I could have the 5 emails there.
Yeah.
Me, and I could, another way of getting around it is I could have the 5 emails and I don't want to highlight the child or the parent, so I could Tipex out I could get rid of the name but show on this date this complaint came, on this.
Yeah.
Do you see? So I could show the evidence without the net. I think you're right, the issue of confidentiality is important. But
Absolutely.
so that's one way of getting around it.
So just, Auntie, when you asked that question about how do you think the person will react when they are, facing a challenging conversation, we've had some responses come through. So I'll share them with you right now. So some people have said they might get defensive or apologetic or make excuses. That was mentioned by Sister Hasina. Mevish has said, I think Friday is good. I think she's referring to our previous...
Yeah, the earlier question, okay.
Sister Tasneem says they may not agree with the marking policy. Maybe it's too overwhelming for them. So that's obviously a school-wide issue. And so we got Sister Aisha who says, I think the leader is offering support in what you and I have just demonstrated, what you've demonstrated. So mashallah, that's good. So what do we say about people's reaction then? Should we expose this part of the slide?
Yeah, just before we do that, you know what you said about can we have a weekly check-in?
Yep.
Because then we started talking about something else. I would have said to you, so I'm happy to do a weekly check-in and we can put our timetables together and see when it's a good time. So are you having problems with your marking? Are you struggling?
I mean, the side of the marking, I'm not really struggling with. It's just, things that at home are a bit challenging at the moment. Things are a bit overwhelming at home, so I haven't been able to do what's required of me.
Okay, so is there any support I can give you in terms of finding things challenging at home?
I mean, look, if you're asking me to mark all my classes by next week, that's obviously going to be a huge challenge for me.
Okay.
What I also say is if I go back and, mark everything that I haven't marked for the last month and a half, that's going to be challenging for me. Can I possibly look to mark the students' work as of now going forward?
Okay, that's a compromise, but yeah, okay. That would
that's a tough one, isn't it?
no, because actually I have to say that your marking since September has been really good, and all of a sudden over the last few weeks it's gone down. So I was wondering whether there are any other extenuating circumstances.
Yeah.
And because you've said that there are problems at home, that now I understand. And so we want to get you back to the same standard as you had before.
Yeah.
And if you need any support, there's Fred in the department who's really good at marking. So I'm happy to have a weekly meeting with you. Think about it, if you need more support, you can sit down with Fred, who teaches some of the same classes as you do, and we can set up an arrangement where Fred helps and supports you in that. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, fine, that's okay, but I don't want to be sitting with another person, another teacher, and them judging my marking.
Okay, that's fine. I'm just saying, so what else would support you? What would you like, Shoaib?
I just want some time. If you could perhaps take off my Thursday afternoon class with my year 9, just to give me that time, extra time that I may need during the school day to catch up. I'll be grateful for that. It won't be a long-term thing. It will just be maybe for a couple of weeks.
Okay, well, that's not a promise I can make at this point, but what I will do, I'll go back and speak to the deputy head in terms of cover and see if there's a time when the supply teacher's available. Occasionally, that might be a possibility, but I cannot promise you that at the moment. But I will explore any possibilities and any other ideas that you come up with after the meeting, because it's hard because I've just asked you the question, but any other we can support you when I see you next week, we can explore that further. How does that sound to you?
That sounds pretty good. I'm pleased with that.
So if I just recap, you have agreed to leave the marking that's gone in the past. If there's time, perhaps you can go back to it. But as of today,
Yep, today.
you're committed to move forward with the marking. I will meet with you in 1 week's time to see how it goes. I think I'll do that for a few weeks, and then at half term and at the end of term, I will go back and review. Is that okay?
I think that's fair. That's fine.
Perfect. And if you think of any other support that you want, and I will speak to the deputy head to see if we can get cover for you for that one class for perhaps this week and next week.
I think that's fair. I think
Um,
that supports me.
I do, because I forget. I write notes and I say to the person, is it okay to write notes? So all the things I've said, I just scribble down, and I got you to agree, so that's great. Thank you.
And it's recorded as well. And we've got people all around the world watching it too.
Everyone's going to hold you accountable, sure.
There you go. There you go. There you go. We've got Sister Thamina who's come in, and she's
Yeah.
asked, what if there has been a valid reason for the issues? Would it be better to go into the conversation with maybe finding out if everything is okay? Otherwise, there may be a negative response. So perhaps she's more alluding to the fact that when I said I've got some issues at home, would it be wise to explore that area?
Um, I would ask the question about what does she see as a valid issue, actually.
Okay. All right. Well,
If
Sister
we could get a
Thamina.
response on that, that'd be really good. But I think you have to be quite sensitive. And I think everything goes back to what I've said several times. It depends on the relationship. So if I've got a positive, trusting relationship with you in general,
Mm-hmm.
I'm more than happy to say, actually, what are the personal circumstances? But if you and I have got a rocky relationship anyway, to push you on that, I wouldn't do it.
Sure.
So a lot depends on the relationship, and also the power thing, because if you're the head of department and you're talking to somebody underneath you, you're in the position of power.
Yeah.
And sometimes you have to respect what people say. And so if people want to, some people are very open and they'll open out to you saying, my mum's just passed away and I'm in a really bad state, so just go easy on me, in which case you would be empathetic and you try harder to do that. But I think as an individual to another individual, you need to respect how much people say or give or don't give, and it depends on the relationship as to how far you'd push that, actually. Does
Yeah.
that make sense?
It does, and I think it answers what she's come back and she said personal health issues, but I think you've clearly covered that.
I think personal health issues, childcare issues, family being very ill or dying or something, you'd go easy on them.
Absolutely.
At least for the short term, and that's just humane, really. And just to give a separate example, not about this, I used to, for many years, people hated me. I was the cover supervisor. So I'd go in first thing in the morning, and all the people would ring in and say, I'm not coming in. So we used to have slips of paper. So I used to go around, people used to hide from me first thing in the morning, because if they thought if I couldn't see them, they wouldn't get the cover, but I'd give it to my prefect who'd go around and find them. So I used to give out people cover first thing in the morning. And so as a leader, your job is to balance, isn't it, always? And that was a time when people were doing cover, so people were expecting 1 or 2 covers every week.
Yep.
And so as an experienced person, you know the teachers around you, you know the children and teachers around you who never take time off, who are always there, even when they're ill, they're in. And that person, if they asked me for an afternoon off to go to a dentist or something, I'd say fine. Or if they wanted to see their child in a school play, I'd say fine, and
Yep.
find somebody to cover them. I don't know whether you might say it's unfair, but there are other people who are quite often ill, and you're often covering them. So
Yep.
if they asked me for time off, I'd be less
Forthcoming.
let's
And
say.
that leads us nicely to a question that we've been asked by Sister Nina, who says, everyone has problems. Where do
Yeah,
we draw the line? And the job is to keep the key here is, how do we as leaders find that balance? So very, very interesting question, which I think you were just about to allude to.
that's a really, really important question. So the reason why I gave you that example is that I thought I was being a fair and just deputy head. So in my opinion, and it might be wrong, if there are people who are always in school and always working late, always in early, and they ever ask for any time off, I'd have no hesitation and give it to them. Whereas other people, when they ask for time off, I may or may not give it to them, although there's a school policy for it. So I'd go according to school policy, but sometimes there's a bit of flexibility. And somebody had to do a cover for somebody who went to the dentist, and they complained to me that it wasn't fair. How comes they got the opportunity to go to the dentist when they had asked for cover? So whatever you do, I thought I was being very fair. Are you with me? And
Yep.
I felt that because I'm a mum, I felt that it was really important, wherever possible, like for school plays or sports day, if somebody just wanted an hour off to come in early or go late or something, I'd always try and do that, because if you help people, if you can cover one lesson and that mum can go and see their child's Christmas play or something, when they come back, you'll get so much more back from that mum, because the school's been kind to them, and
Yep.
they will give more back to the school. So it's a matter of trying to be as fair as possible, but I found out the hard way, being fair to some is always not fair to others. So it's where you hold that balance. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. It's kind of like a give and take kind of situation. So the more you are willing to do for your institution, your school, your colleagues, your head teacher, then
And everyone knows, the people who are in early, stay late, every production they're there, they give the time to the kid, and then you'd want to help them because they help the school, don't
yep,
they?
absolutely.
The people, who as soon as the bell goes, as soon as they can go, they're just off. I'm not saying that people go off and don't work, but as well as everyone else, and kids know who are the hardworking teachers who care and are dedicated. So in order to keep them on board, it's important where you can that there's that flexibility. So there are always policies and rules, but there's always flexibility within that.
Sure.
And the other thing, I might have mentioned it earlier, is you as a leader and the leader of a team, it's not about having difficult conversations, but I think it's the basis of it. If you respect your team, and we were talking about if I had like a meeting, I'd make sure that there were always tea and biscuits. You know, if people are giving their time at the end of the day, you know, they're tired, they're hungry, they want to go home. But just that thing of sorting out tea and biscuits for individuals, I think shows that you've made a bit of an effort.
Absolutely.
And so if you value your team, what's that phrase? If something in your team is positive, praise them positively to the whole world. But if somebody does something wrong, just do it in private.
Yeah. I think from one of my leadership courses, one of the coaches mentioned it. It was Pip versus Rip. Praise in public and remand in private.
I like that.
Oh, don't worry. I'll give it to you later. Right. Yeah, I think everyone else is right. I'll write that down for
Why
everyone's
am
there.
I saying that? I'm saying in the whole context of being a leader. So if you do things, I used to like doing things like, you might think it's small and trivial, and I think women do it probably more than men.
Mhm.
When somebody in the department or in my team did something good, I'd write them a little card, like a little thank you card.
Mm.
You know, and people put up these little cards and people had kept them and all sorts of things. And to me, they were just a tiny little nothingness, but actually
Acts
other
of kindness.
really, really appreciated them. And so if you're kind and do things for your team and you talk about we, not I or them, there are ways of building up a team which is not on this. But the reason why I'm alluding to it is because if you've got a good, strong, cohesive team, it's much easier to take somebody out and have this difficult conversation.
Auntie, does it vary how you have the conversation? So if it's somebody who's sort of older than you, would you be quite respectful? I mean, we find that in our communities, Muslim communities in particular, that there's a lot of respect given to the elder, and obviously, in schools now, fortunately, or there are situations where sometimes the young person is in charge or responsible
Yeah.
for somebody elder. How would you kind of have that kind of conversation?
I, th- I think respect is really important, and it's probably from where I grew up. It was more important, but actually, as an older, experienced teacher, I have to put up my hands and say sometimes I'm wrong, and I'm more than happy if somebody points out something that I've done wrong or unfairly, or I put my hands up and say, and the day I say I've stopped learning or I can't learn from anyone, that's the day I pack up, because you're always learning. And the CV right at the beginning, when I was writing it down, you wrote the year when I started teaching. I was thinking that year there were no computers, there was no internet, there was no Wi-Fi. So the world in this number of years has changed beyond recognition. But I think the basic respect that you don't lose anything by giving people respect.
No, no, sir. Should we proceed on to the next part, Auntie?
Yeah. How do you think the person will react?
I'm preparing for responses. Here we go.
And so there are 5 behaviours there. Some of those were mentioned. Sure.
Yep, yeah, absolutely. Some people did say that they
Everything.
think.
When you're talking to somebody, they say yes, 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 or no, this is wrong. Who complained? That's not right. It was only 25% of my books not marked, not 30% of my books marked. There are some people who just argue on every point. The person might be defensive or blames you. You're rubbish. That's why I couldn't do it. The person is impatient or tries to sidetrack or brings up a red herring. Do you remember 2 years ago you said you were going to put me on training and you didn't, so I can't do my job because you never did that, Or the person talking too much is sometimes just a red herring. How will you respond? We've put 3 points down, but we've got more detail for you.
Absolutely.
So the evidence, go back to the evidence. So the evidence is absolutely key. What you need to do in any of those situations is try and maintain a calm composure. I think deep breaths are good before the meeting, and if you're getting irritated during the meeting, just take a deep breath and note down what they're saying. Just note it down. And then, are you going to reveal the wonderfulness?
There you go. So just to let everyone know what Auntie's just covered here, where we speak about the person, the kind of behaviors they may exhibit, we've actually come together and, put down these behaviors here and given you some strategies as well. So there are, much more detailed, and obviously this is something that we're going to share with you, but this is something from Auntie's experience, mine, whereby we can, think of what ways can we support you in having those challenging conversations. Because sometimes people who pose those kind of or exhibit those kind of behaviors, it kind of catch you off guard. Unless you're sort of well versed or well spoken and are quite confident with yourself, you will know how to sort of behave in that manner, right, Auntie?
Absolutely. And the good news is the more difficult conversations you have, the less painful they become and the easier they become.
Yeah.
Not always, and sometimes things will come out of the blue, but I would go back to the more prepared you are and the more you've thought it through. So we've given you 5 scenarios, and it may be one of those 5, or it may be none of them. But if you've prepared and thought it through, I think it just puts you in a better state of mind for moving forward. So
Absolutely.
the next slide is closing the conversation. So like I summarised, agree the way forward, short, medium and long term, and thank them, thank them for giving their time and for meeting with you, and make sure you set a date and time for the next review, and document the conversation, share it with your line, just say that you're going to share it with your line manager and obviously the person that you're having the conversation with. So, where the information goes is really important.
Yeah, and just following on from what Auntie has said, just to reiterate, we will send you the completed template and a blank version of this. So yeah, we will send you the pro forma of that, and it's all to support you in having those challenging conversations. So this session, I know it's only for an hour or so, but at the same time, if we can provide you those tools, those essential toolkits to help you, progress and become confident, then, by all means, that would be good. So we now move on to structuring the conversation in terms of how we, ask or how we embed or embark on having those conversations. So Auntie, what kind of tips would you give us?
Okay, so in terms of structuring the conversation, I will probably mention some of the things that we've said earlier. Start the conversation with a positive comment. So the positive, negative, and positive. It's really important to start with a positive comment. Be very clear about the objectives. Know exactly what you're talking about. Be clear what your non-negotiables are. There's some flexibility, but be clear what your bottom line is. Listen actively. It's very easy, especially in a difficult meeting where you might be feeling nervous, just to say what you've got to say and expect them to say and be done with it, and you want it finished as soon as possible. But try and listen actively, try and judge the mood of the person and take on board what they're saying if you can, and the more you prepare and the calmer you are, the more active you'll be able to listen, and treat it as an inquiry, not a defensive conversation. You're not there to attack them, but you're there with them to find a way forward. So number 4, allow them to explain their point of view. I think this is absolutely key, because it's easy to call someone in and say, Shoaib, you've not been doing your marking, it's not good enough, you've got to improve, off you go, bye. And so allowing them to explain their point of view is absolutely crucial, particularly 2 things might come out. One is what we've spoken about a little bit before, like personal circumstances or hardships or stresses, but the other one might be some sort of training need that the person identifies that's invisible to you, and unless you ask that question, you'll never know. So allow them to explain their point of view, or any extenuating circumstances. And then what I've said several times during this conversation is, how can I support you in doing what you're doing? So it's like we together, and how can I support you? Not it's you, it's your problem, you're doing everything wrong, what are you going to do about it? On your bike, just do it, which is slightly different. And finally, setting clear targets and timescales and get the person to agree, you know, what the target is and the timescale. So make sure you minute it for yourself and for their records. So, and let them know that you'll be sending an email and do that straight away. In order to structure the difficult conversation, I think it's useful, well, I find it useful to think through and write it down, perhaps write down an opening statement and make sure it's full of facts and try and make it accusation free. For example, I would like to discuss your performance and offer my support in finding a solution. According to the data, your results are down by 30%. So then you get Shoaib's perspective to see where they're coming from and try and ask open-ended questions and ask for feedback. So it's a two-way discussion. Yeah?
Sure, that's pretty straightforward. I think that covers everything that we've spoken about in our pro forma as well. You just literally summarized it wonderfully.
So
yeah, we've got a bit of a task here for everyone. Auntie was going to give us some hints, but before she does that, we've basically put a question here together for yourself. So in the comment section, what we'd like you to do is to tell us, why do people struggle to have a challenging conversation? So whilst you all are going to be typing away and telling us why people struggle to have that conversation, I believe Auntie has a question for me.
Yeah, sure. Tell me an example of a difficult conversation that you had and how you managed it.
Well, this is quite interesting. So this wasn't planned. This wasn't, something that I had set out. Everything that you basically said, none of that was done. What happened was I had a member of staff storm into my office in my team, and it was a shared office. It was like a workroom that we used, and she was complaining about the amount of marking she had to do. She complained about my treatment towards her and the fact that I wasn't being fair towards some of the classes that she had to teach. And she kind of like erupted in front of another colleague of mine. So it was quite overwhelming for me because I was like, whoa, what's happening here? But again, like, you put your leadership hat on, you think, right, stay calm. You're the captain of the ship. You need to be, you can't be seen to mirror that kind of energy. And, I just said to her, look, we need to arrange a time where we can go through this thing again together so that we can, talk about some of the difficulties you're having. And then again, she didn't like that response. She goes, no, who do you think you are? You're making my life hell. You're making my life a misery. I come to work, not for you. I come to work to, earn money. I was like, what is happening over here? But thankfully, what I did was I didn't really match her tone. I became a bit, not angry or annoyed, but, I did have to sort of step up a bit and say to her, look, this isn't the time that we're having this kind of conversation in an open place like this. We need to have a meeting. We need to make sure that it's constructive and it's done formally. So I ask you to please go and, take a break, do something that will help you come back and improve. And then, we can pick this up later. And thankfully, like, she went away, realized what she had done wrong, came and apologized. And then we didn't even speak about it again, because the next time we had that meeting, we kind of followed the kind of advice that you've given here.
Excellent. Good. So that's a really good news story. There are several comments coming through, so it might be quite good to pick up comments, do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. So we've got here Hasina Haq, who says, so the question was, why do people struggle to have a kind of challenging conversation? She said, lack confidence, don't want to upset people or damage relationships, ensuring fairness and consistency with staff members. Sister Nina has said, people think of it personally rather than dealing with things without the emotions of people's personal feelings. Sister Sarah has said, people can feel insecure in themselves, making them nervous. Sister Tahira said, feel ill-equipped to have the conversation, nervous about what they may respond back with. Lutfa has said, afraid of the reaction. Zara has said, not wanting to admit a weakness. Some very good responses so far. I'll read a couple more and then we can progress. We're a small team, don't want to cause friction with the staff base. It's like a family. Lack of speaking skills. You're afraid to upset the person. You're afraid to upset the person or afraid of the person's reaction. Some people might get very emotional. And difficult if staff are friends, family, or family, friends?
That's brilliant reactions we've got.
Absolutely, absolutely. There's loads of stuff. So, shall we look at how we can have difficult conversations?
Yeah, so making the conversation a success. I think the more, just one point I'm going to make on the comments that have come up, and that is, if you feel nervous before a conversation, perhaps get someone or even a mirror and just practice what you're going to say, and hopefully some of the hints and the pro forma and the discussions that we've had, hopefully that will help people in having the difficult conversations. The next couple of slides are absolutely what a couple of people have pointed out, and that is managing the emotions. So you might be feeling emotional, but also you're actually in the position of power. Just think, if your emotions are all over the place, think about the person coming in and feeling, in inverted commas, being told off. It's their emotions as well. So how do you manage your emotions and their emotions? So the next couple of slides are for you to think about that, because in terms of managing your emotions, if you're able to approach the situation rationally, if you're angry or defensive, you won't get the right outcome. There are 5 points here, Shoaib. Have we got time to do what we said we were going to do?
Yeah. We're fine. I mean, we have reached our hour quota, but in terms of slides, we don't have many more left. So I'm happy for you to.
So what I'd like everyone to do, if that's okay, Shoaib and I came with these 5 ideas about managing your emotions. I'll just give you a minute or two to read them. And it might be useful if you just wrote one number. Which one of those 5 points do you think is the most important for you in terms of managing your emotions? So I'll just give you a minute to think about it. And if you just type in the number, that would be the easiest, wouldn't it, Shoaib?
Yep. So we can see which number is the most popular one so far. So we've got Adnan, who has said number 2, thinking about your body language. Okay.
If I let people respond, and I'll just talk about thinking about your employees' emotion just for 2 minutes.
Yeah, go for it.
This is about your emotions, but your employees' emotion, it's quite likely that you will face negative emotions during difficult conversations, so you need to gear up to that. Don't just focus on the content of the conversation, which is a lot of what we've been talking about. Also pay attention to the emotions as well, and listen to the words and the feelings, and you can tell a lot from body language as well.
Mm-hmm.
Remaining calm, managing your reactions will help the person not to become inflamed or defensive. They might still be defensive, but if you're calm, that will give off positive vibes. Whereas if you become annoyed and irritated, things could go pear-shaped. Do not make, this is really important, do not make a promise that you cannot fulfill just to diffuse the employee's emotional reaction. So when I was talking to Shoaib and he said he wanted time off on a Wednesday afternoon, I said, I don't have the authority to do that, but I will go away and ask to see whether that can be done. So if I'm under pressure, I'll just say, yes, Shoaib, yes, I can take you off Wednesday afternoon. And then if I can't do it, that makes the problem even worse. So don't promise things just to finish the conversation and get out of it.
Yeah.
And reinforce the behaviour that you want. Say, I'm really happy with the way that you've taken this feedback on board. It's good that you are happy to openly discuss this topic, or try and put positive things in. So Shoaib, how are we doing with the numbers?
Yeah, quite a few people have commented, and there's a mixture between 4 and 5, a couple of 1s there I can see as well, a few 2s, but we're edging around more 4 and 5s.
4 and 5. So don't be afraid to be empathetic during the conversation with the employee. Speak slowly, avoid using long, complex sentences. Try and be clear and direct with your communication. I don't know, some people, especially when they're nervous, go round the houses to try and avoid getting to the crux of it. So just be clear and direct and simple is really important. and consider the view of your employee. I think that's really important. If you're angry with them or have a poor relationship, it may affect your ability to resolve the issue successfully. Absolutely. I mean, they're all important, but it depends on where you are as to which ones you think are important.
Yeah.
I like that, people using more than one number.
It's cheeky, isn't it? Right. So then we move on to managing your employees' emotions. If you want to quickly say something about this, Auntie.
Yeah. So I think I just went through it, but that's fine. So it's the things that I alluded to just now.
Yep.
It's quite likely that they might get defensive and emotional, so just be aware of that. And it's the content as well as the emotions. That's why we're concentrating on the emotion. It was really good because somebody wrote in the comments, didn't they?
Yep.
Emotions are really important.
Absolutely.
Don't make promises you can't fulfill, and you remain calm while you're doing it. So all those things, if you're in control of your emotions, then hopefully you'll get a slightly better reaction from the employee. And a couple of things, sometimes somebody might cry, and that can be quite unnerving or off-putting. Just make sure you've got a box of tissues. Just make sure you've got, I always had boxes of tissues, and I always had tissues and water. I used to have chocolates and cake as well quite often. But anyway, that's fine. That's fine. But some people, that can really throw them.
Mm-hmm.
And the other thing is that can be really off-putting is silence. You're saying things. And what do you think, Shoaib?
Oh,
silence. You have to practice silence. And actually, I don't know whether you've been in this situation, but you ask somebody a question and you're waiting, and then you think, I have to say something. But actually, if you just wait 10 more seconds, it will eventually come. But actually, that can be quite painful. But sometimes everyone's different, and sometimes people need the thinking time or need to think about the work, So try to be comfortable with silence is an easy thing to say, but I know it's a really hard thing to do. And that, again, comes with practice.
Yeah.
Would you agree?
I do indeed, and I think it's all about the more you do of these challenging conversations, the better you become. I mean, I used to be quite scared of them. Now I quite look forward to them.
How can you look forward to them? Challenge.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's an area of development of mine, or a weakness of mine that was before. Now I'd say it's become a bit of a strength. So that's
absolutely. And I would actually say, in the role of management, having the difficult conversation is one of the hardest things because other things you can talk to people about, and also you can talk to people about how they've managed it or what they've done or so when you're preparing for it, talk to other people.
absolutely.
With confidence and so on. I want to ask everyone one question before I go on to the last slide or so. Is that okay?
That's fine.
I'd just like, okay, I might touch on that in a minute. I'd just like everyone, just in a few words, if that's okay, just to think about, because we're almost at the end, and I'll talk about the end bit in a second, but while you're sitting here thinking about the last hour, if possible, could you just write in a few words one nugget or one thing that you found useful, or one thing that you've learned, or one thing that you're looking forward to receiving the pro forma, or just one positive thing about this session, if that's okay. That'd be really helpful, just to have a look, if that's okay with you.
Yep.
So after the conversation with everything, I love it. Chocolates or sweets count in Turkey, we have a saying.
To end on a sweet note.
Always like it. It's true. It's true. Chocolates always work. Chocolates. Just before I go, after the conversation, somebody wrote, how can you avoid awkwardness afterwards? What if the relationship is not the same after? It depends on the conversation. Like the conversation that Shoaib and I demonstrated, we came to, I think, an agreement, didn't we?
That's right.
And and we agreed how to move it forward. And I think there were some difficulties, but I saw Shoaib's point of view, and he, I think, saw my point of view, and we moved forward together. So that, in a sense, is an ideal scenario, and not all your conversations will be that. And there may well be ones where, you know, people ain't happy, and you've got to accept that. So occasionally it might be that there's awkwardness afterwards, but I think you have to be professional, and there's no way that you can be unprofessional. So even if the person, if you have the meeting and they've not marked the books, then you take that on board. But you, as the line manager, still have to be professional. You have to be a positive role model. So if they avoid you or aren't talking to you, I would still say, good morning, Shoaib, how are you? And pretend that everything's fine, and it may well get better. So you cannot control the way somebody reacts to you, but you can only control yourself. So you need to try and still be as positive as possible, be as inclusive. If it was a difficult conversation, you know, I'd make a point of trying to be more positive, you know, in a team meeting, or try and find something positive so that at a team meeting I could share that. Do you
That's
understand?
right.
Counteract the negative,
Yeah.
to try and put some positive in. But you can't ever sort out the awkwardness, because the awkwardness will probably, hopefully, be coming from the other person, as long as you're not showing awkwardness after it. And I think everything that we've said about thinking about the conversation, planning for the conversation, being confident about the conversation, coming to an agreed conclusion, all those things I think will lead to less awkwardness. Whereas if you just go straight in and say, Shoaib, your marking's awful, get it sorted out, off you go, then that might lead to awkwardness. So hopefully everything that we've said might be helpful.
Yeah.
So after the conversation, make sure you write down any agreements and write it straight away. Give yourself a minute or two just to reflect and learn from the experience. Everything you feared from before the conversation, did that happen, or was it more positive, or what did you learn from it? Is there anything that you could have done differently? What's the learning that you take from that conversation? Follow up by an email. Make sure that you're both clear about the issue moving forward, the dates and times for meeting, if it's long-term, medium-term, short-term. If you've looked into covering on a Wednesday afternoon, say that that's possible for the next 2 weeks, or I'm terribly sorry I tried, but that's not possible. Whatever you've done, try and follow up straight away. And I'd say the meeting in a week's time is important, but actually the next day say, oh, good morning, how are you? How are things? You know, just, you know, to check up formally and informally. You should not gossip.
Oops, sorry about that. Somebody just
share the conversation with anybody else apart from your line manager, possibly, and you need to share that with the person who you're going to share it with. And the awkwardness, you should not treat them differently. You need to remain professional. So there are some do's and don'ts for after the conversation. So I hope that's useful.
Yeah, that was pretty good. And what I was going to say was that's pretty much brought our session to a conclusion. So before we end it right there, we've got an opportunity for everyone to ask some questions, Auntie.
Yeah, I'm more than happy. I know the time's gone over, so if anyone has to leave and people might have left, that's fine. But I'm happy to stay here if people have got specific questions, because it was hard for me to. There were lots of comments.
How would you like to take questions, Auntie? Would you like people to ask them by unmuting their mics, or would you prefer them to type in the box, or either?
Either.
Okay, so we're now opening the floor up to questions. Obviously, the session officially has now ended. But if you'd like to stay behind and ask some questions and get some insight into having challenging conversations in your school setting, we prefer you to keep your school members of staff, confidential. Like, please don't mention their names or the school, because they obviously protect you and us as well. But if you just want some general advice, please say so. Right. So we've got. Yep.
Because people might go, I'd just like to say a big thank you to everyone. It's been fantastic to have the feedback as we've been doing it. And can I make a confession? This is my first Zoom online training session. And thanks to Shoaib, because you've been absolutely fantastic supporting me. Thank you.
Thank you, Auntie. I think you've been wonderful as well. You've been a natural. I couldn't tell. Right. Okay. So we're getting some points here about how Zoom is tricky. It can be quite difficult. Right. So we've got a question here from Fatima. It says Fat's iPhone, so I'm taking it as Fatima. How do you respond to a team member who is always so negative about the school and anything you request or plan as a department, and sort of looks down on any new plans or advice? How do you respond to them?
I would probably take that person to one side and just have a quiet conversation with them, and almost not even officially. It might be like a cup of tea or something, or over lunch.
Yeah.
And some people are generally always negative. Some people are generally always positive. But I think the line is where the negativity creeps into the professionalism. And so, and also a bit like what we were saying earlier, if that person from the day you met them until now, if they've always been negative, because some people are, there is no way on earth that you can change that. But if there's someone who's sometimes negative but have become more negative recently, or just even worse, in your meetings are negative, but to the whole world they're positive, that's a different issue. Okay, so I'd sit down and say, I've noticed that, in the meetings you're really negative, and when we talked about this, you said that, and when you said this, you said that. Again, sort of along similar lines to what I said before, but in a softer way. Have the evidence, say 3 or 5 examples. So if they say, no, I'm not negative, why are you picking on me, well, when I said about, doing lessons after school, you were negative. When I said about XYZ, give specific examples. The more specific you are, and the more different types of examples, again, is so. If I'd say, if there's somebody who's a little bit negative and has become more negative, that might be the point in time when talking to them. They might have changing circumstances at home, they might be upset, something's bugging them, or they might just say, well, you got the job instead of me, so I ain't happy. So certain things you can't change, but if they're saying, I'm having a really bad time at home, and it comes out as, I've got a new baby, I'm not sleeping, I'm trying to catch up, I'm trying to do everything, so you're asking me to do more, I can't do it. So trying to get underneath, not just look at the behavior, but just try and talk to them as a human being is what I'd do, probably.
Mashallah. I think that's quite important, because when you do come across people like that, it's about opening them up and finding a bit about them, because they've had things done to them in their life, perhaps. And I think buying someone lunch or taking them out to dinner is definitely a way to show them that you care. It does,
No, I agree with you. I
like that insight there. Right. Okay. So let's see if we've got any more questions come through. So a lot of people are saying thank you. Mevish says, excellent, miss. Love listening to you. Hope to see you again. It's brilliant. Zoom is tricky. Fatima, well, not Fatima, it's Fatiha, not Fatima, the one who said Fat's iPhone, and I got the name wrong. I think pretty much we are a bit slowing down with question and comments. We'll give it another few more moments.
The session was so good, nobody has any questions.
It was so good. It was so comprehensive. MashaAllah. Well done, Auntie. Well done.
That's a pleasure. That's a pleasure.
So, alhamdulillah, jazakallah khair for that, Auntie Rukhsana. It was a pleasure having you on board. I think we will do something like this again in the future, perhaps on another topic. Just a reminder for everyone, we will be sending this out to you as an email with our YouTube link, as well as the resources and the PowerPoint as well, for you to use in the future or for reference. But for now, I'd like to say jazakallah khair to Auntie Rukhsana for giving up your time.
No
And
problem.
wish you a good evening, and I wish everyone have also a pleasant evening too. So
And when's the last session?
the last session, thank you for reminding me, that will be taking place this Wednesday at 5 o'clock, and that will be delivered by a brother called Kareem Murcia, who is a principal. He used to be a principal in the United Kingdom, and now he's gone to the UAE, and he'll be on delegation. So looking very, very, very good to delegating your tasks within your department. All right, Auntie Rukhsana, take care.
Sure. Thank you, Nida Trust. Bye.
Assalamu alaikum. Assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum salam.